Delighted to have Keith Bhatia with me from SS8. Maybe we could start by looking at the fact that the telecoms market is alarmingly competitive.
Mhm.
What strategies do you see telcos are leveraging to cope with that situation? And how do you think things are going to unfold?
Well, Annie, it's good to see you again, and really appreciate the opportunity to give some of our views. Let's talk a little bit about the telecom market. It is going through a pretty rough time at the moment, as we all know. We're seeing a lot of redesigns within companies. We're seeing a lot of changes that are going on within the telecom market, and predominantly a lot of this comes down to how they're positioning themselves. How the individual telcos are positioning, how they're, trying to tap the right pricing models. They're looking at the new wave of devices and connections, and they're trying to figure out what is the right size of their business to be able to make the financials work for the investments that they've made recently in 5G, broadband, and high capacity networks. And then they're looking for the applications that will provide that revenue and the long-term viability of such.
How successful do you think they're being with their rethinking? I mean, are you seeing some changes in the market for the better?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think technology has really has become a force factor in terms of changing the market. As we move in both the technology investment cycle, the technology investment cycle into cloud, which I think is well underway,
Yeah.
the technology investment cycle into edge-based technologies for high bandwidth applications, the technology investment that requires multiple, millions of connected devices, to be able to manage them in a very fast way. And of course, the amount of data that we're seeing within the network. The operators have made some significant investments. They're looking for the applications to be able to get that good return on investments. And at the same time, we also have a changing regulatory environment as well, and both of which are very much within our domain.
Let's talk a little bit more about those regulatory changes. Um, what are the main ones, and how is SA navigating these changes? Because they could have quite a profound effect on your business.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we as a company focus very much on mandated solutions, such as location for emergency services, US 911, 112, 999, those type of capabilities and precision of that, knowing where the injured party is immediately, in a mission critical real time fashion. We also have a similar mandated requirement in the telcos for lawful intercept or lawful intelligence, and with the way the technology has been moving from into the whole cloud environment, especially now that the cores are changing to cloud, all of the connection points are changing. So we've been spending a lot more time with the standards to be able to standardize how you get that information from the network and move it as fast as possible to the law enforcement or the public safety, like the ambulance service, fire service, as you can. But the key thing is that, as these investments are being made, everyone's looking for value for money. And so now we have to use not just the technology, but we have to think differently about how we're offering things to the market. So, for example, a location service, that's a standardized location service can be used initially for the emergency service, i.e. that 999 call, right? Or it can be used for lawful intercept, which would be a legal service as well. Or in some cases and in some countries, it can be used for commercial services, such as providing you a coupon, when you're right outside a Starbucks. So we're seeing those, or even verification services, making sure that your phone verifies that it is where your credit card is, as an example in financial services and digital identity management. So there are these many, many new services that are coming from the platforms themselves.
Okay, so often in telco, regulation is seen as something of a sort of drag on the industry, but in your view, it sounds like you feel it brings many opportunities as well.
I think the key thing about regulation is we keep society safer. That's what the core of the platform that we provide does. But at the same time, it also provides enhancements. And I mean, as the technology moves and continues to scale and it continues to evolve, we're going to see a lot more opportunity to get productivity out of the network. AI is just, while it's being hyped at the moment, has an incredible opportunity to give us, great productivity, both on the network analytics side, on the network optimization side, and even on the network regulatory side. And we already have seen, we expect about 30% of the workflow, right, to basically be automated within the end-to-end flow. I mean, that is a very positive thing that brings down the cost for everybody, but there is this balance between how much a telco will spend versus, how much they need to provide the service and whether they're willing to do that. Some telcos take the regulatory environment extremely seriously. And most of them are our customers. Some telcos, skirt the regulatory environment, and that's a decision that they make. And then they deal with the consequences when they happen.
I was going to say it's at their peril. So, just talking about the way that telcos are looking at technology and the huge investment they've made over the last 3 years, and the pandemic and upsets in supply chains, a lot of different factors. What do you think this has had on the telco market, on the vendors, this huge spend over the last 3 years by the telcos?
Well, I think we've had an enormous cycle of spending, of capex that occurred. I would say exactly as you said, the last 3 to 4 years. I mean, Mobile Europe has been reporting on it
Yeah.
for the last few years. You've got some really interesting insights, but at some point, all of that has to be consumed. We know that we've got a transition going on. We've got two or three different transitions happening at the same time. First, you have a technology transition where the money was put in to build the technology out, specifically, moving from a virtual environment to a containerized cloud environment. The second one is the people transition, moving from people that understood old networking legacy capability sets now into cloud capability sets. And we can never underestimate that. That's a big transition for people, and in some cases, some just don't want to do that. Some will move out, we'll bring in, and then the third and the most important one is the services that are being provided by the telcos. I mean, fixed to wireless transition is an absolutely incredible opportunity for the 5G domain. And it's one that I think is taking off quite for those that have invested in it. Network slicing, where industrial companies will have their own network. Now we have so many more MVNOs that are building out even their own. Yeah. It's kind of both scary in the sense that you've got too many players, but it's really exciting in the sense you've got more innovation coming and players that are thinking differently. And we personally are really enjoying it. I mean, I can't tell you how often we have these discussions about should we go into a public cloud or in a private cloud. I mean, we've deployed, as an example, multiple systems, and very large systems in a public cloud. I never thought that would happen, in the time frame we've done that. We've deployed systems, very large systems, all about 5G systems in the private cloud, and now we're seeing highly dynamic, dynamic environments, where we have thousands of devices connected to our systems, even in just one very large telco, as an example. And the telcos are thinking differently.
Well, I think Telefonica in Germany moving its 5G network to the cloud is a huge thing because it's the first time that an established rather than a greenfield operator has kind of taken such a big step, and it's gradually moving its 5G base, and it's not going to invest any more money in anything that's not 5G on the mobile side. It's quite
Yeah,
an amazing step.
we've very much seen that. I mean, we've seen some new players going into the, AWS as an example, right? Having deployed that. And now we're starting to see, as you say, existing players bifurcating their networks and doing some in the cloud, public cloud and some in the private cloud. It's actually very fascinating to see how the networks are evolving and developing.
It was interesting to talk to the CTO there, who said he knew he couldn't compete on traditional networks, so he had his eye on the cloud for the moment his feet landed at Telefonica Germany in that role. So how do you see in the next 5 years emerging technologies impacting telco? And I'm just thinking about what you said about the big investment over the last 3 years. Just plumbing it in and getting it up and running is only part of the job. It's how you leverage it, what you do with it, and I guess maybe you can use it in ways you hadn't foreseen originally as new technologies come along. What's your thinking here, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing in 5G all these new services coming out. Network slicing is enabling some of those. As I say, the first application that we've seen really take off is the fixed wireless transition. And that seems to be doing pretty well. It's beaten all the numbers that we were aware of. Network slicing appears to be the next field. I think the biggest thing that's going to happen, in addition to the whole migration into the cloud, that we're already in the middle of, I think the biggest thing is going to be the amount of connected devices. We're going to see hundreds of millions of connected devices into the network, and the speed of which these are, things like a fridge, things like a toaster. I know it seems funny, but people like me who want to look at their rings, or who want to look at their cameras, or who want to know where their cars are, just keeping all of those connections, and the fact that we're moving into into an autonomous world, all of these connections need to be up all the time. You can have them short little blips, but they need to be available. I think the next phase after that is going to be, while we're going through the AI hype at the moment, we're also going through a lot of learning. Incredible amount of investment is being made in learning how AI and how it actually works, both in the network and in the front end. So there was a recent article that said that 70% of the benefit of AI will happen in customer experience and customer service. I believe that was McKinsey, if I quoted the source correctly. But I actually feel it's the other way around. I feel that while I think there's going to be a big benefit in the front end interaction with devices and individuals and applications, I actually think the back end is going to have an even bigger impact. As I mentioned earlier, we see at least 30% of our workflows from end to end going into using AI models. But that's only the beginning, because we can then start automating right from installation all the way through to troubleshooting, all the way through to, through potentially corrections, some of its own corrections. So there's a great opportunity over the next 5 years, in my mind, as these tools becomes far more sophisticated. And to be honest, thanks to the work of the open source community, I mean, Facebook and Google and all these guys that are contributing, and the speed at which we're moving at, these tools are becoming available to everybody.
I was talking to a CTO of a really large operator recently, and he said to me that he felt, regarding root cause analysis of problems in the network, that 50 to 75% was machine learning, but then you kind of hit a wall.
Yes.
And getting 75% to 95% is going to really be where the AI kicks in.
Yes, I think
that would make a big difference.
What's interesting is, if you look at the old world, right, you look at the way that we used to handle monitoring. Monitoring used to take about 10% of the capacity. You look at the orchestration world, you're looking at about 40% of the capacity. You move into tomorrow's world, where we're looking at about 50 to 60% of the capacity is going to be in healing, monitoring tools, Grafana, Proximus, and all of these type of tools that will be able to provide information and learning, which will then be used by these AI tools. and various other algorithms to be able to enhance the network and self-heal the network.
It's interesting that I've seen a couple of surveys where it turns out operators are much more optimistic about being able to monetize AI than they are about 5G standalone now.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people are seeing the value in AI and the tools and the algorithms because they're becoming available to be able to be network enhancing, which means you don't need as many people as you used to have. You can do the same amount of work with maybe half or 60%. But where I think it's really going to take a really interesting turn is going to be in security. Because if you look at the cost of security, whether it's at the vulnerability level, whether it's the cybersecurity level, whether it's even in the piece of code that you're writing and you're verifying and you're pen testing, the actual cost has gone up at a phenomenal rate. So for every release you do, you're spending on the application, you're spending on the DevOps environment, you're spending on the QA environment, but now you're spending on the security environment. And in the old days, it used to be very simple where you do a scan, a Nexus scan, a triple scan, or whatever the scan. Not anymore. It's not just a scan. It's got to become integral in your software development cycle. And because we're mission critical and we're real-time services, so everything we provide has to meet the security limits, and that's going to be a game changer. And I think the tools are going to become automated there, and I think that's where AI is going to have a fairly big impact. At least I hope so.
Okay, well, Keith Bhatia of SS8, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you. It's good seeing you again, Annie.